A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to you all. We are here today to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Pather Panchali, which had its domestic release in Kolkata in August 1955. It was a transforming moment that radically changed the face of Indian cinema. This is a memorable day for all of us. On behalf of Society for the Preservation of Satyajit Ray Archives, we would like to extend our special thanks to our honored speakers. I'll call out the names alphabetically again. Srimati Aparna Sen, Sri Dibakar Banerjee, Sri Dilip Padgaonkar, Srimati Nandita Das, Srimati Shormila Tagore, Sri Shujit Sarkar, Sri Sujoy Ghosh, Sri Shumon Mukhopadhyay, and Sri Dhitiman Chatterjee will be the moderator of the seminar. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Peerless, HDFC, and SBI, and last but not the least, we are grateful to Sri D.N. Ghosh, the president of our society, without whose continued encouragement and support, our society would never have reached where it stands today. The society, being the custodian of the priceless legacies of Satyajit Ray, has been pursuing quietly the objectives of restoring, preserving, and disseminating the works of the master since 1994. Dissemination has been done through the organization of exhibition of films, shows at home, abroad, and collaboration for publication of books by Ray. For film restoration, we teamed up with the Los Angeles-based Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Science. So far, majority of Maestro's 36 films have been restored at the Academy Archive. The Society has arguably the largest and most authentic archive on Ray in its custody. A large part of Ray's paper legacy has been restored too. The large personal library that Ray left, as well as his personal effects, is also being carefully preserved. The Society has also been organizing Ray Memorial Lectures since 2009. This is for the first time that the Society has taken the initiative to hold a dialogue on a large scale to talk about larger issues concerning cinema. We plan to make the dialogue series an annual feature of the Society activities. We shall be screening a documentary on Satyajit Ray after the seminar is over. Directed by James Beveridge, the film was made in 1960s. The duration of the films is just 26 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you once again for your presence this morning. And right now, may I ask upon Shri Obhik Ganguly of HDFC to come on stage just to speak a few words.
A very good morning to all of you, Shuprabhat, and it's a real pleasure and honor from HDFC side আপনাদের এই বিরাট বড় গ্যাদারিংয়ে প্রেজেন্ট থাকার জন্য এবং আমরা এই যে 60th year of this famous film এটার সঙ্গে অ্যাসোসিয়েটেড আছি এই প্রেজেন্টেশনের জন্য সেটা আমরাও গর্বিত ঠিক লাইক পথের পাঁচালীর মতো এইচডিএফসিরও পথ শুরু হয়েছিল way back in 1977 এবং on our way আমাদের কোম্পানি গৃহঋণ দিয়ে থাকে for পারচেজিং হাউসেস, তার জন্য লোনস, এবং আমরাও অনেক এগিয়ে চলেছি 1977 থেকে। ধরুন আমাদের আজকে গ্রাহকের সংখ্যা 50 লক্ষ ছাড়িয়ে গিয়েছে। আমরা সারা ভারতবর্ষে 400টির ওপর অফিস আমাদের চারপাশে আছে এবং সমস্ত স্টেটসে, সমস্ত তার ক্যাপিটাল সিটিসে আমরা প্রেজেন্ট। ঠিক যেরকম এই ফেমাস মুভিতে দ্য গ্রেট সত্যজিৎ রের যদি আমরা সোশিও ইকোনমিক ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডও দেখি, মানে যে ফিল্মে যাদের রিপ্রেজেন্ট করা হয়েছে, they were a little from the as we call it economically weaker section, ওই সময়কার যে আমরা যে চিত্র দেখতে পাই। শুধু তাই নয়, ধরুন কোম্পানি আজকাল ওই সেগমেন্ট অফ পপুলেশনের জন্য গৃহঋণ দিয়ে থাকছে, মানে ধরুন 10 লক্ষ টাকা বা 15 লক্ষ টাকা। আমরা চাইছি, ঠিক যেরকম সরকারও চাইছেন হোম ওনারশিপ বাড়াতে সারা ভারতবর্ষের মধ্যে, তো সেই সেকশনকেও অ্যাড্রেস করা হচ্ছে। তো once again we are extremely proud to present this, and our senior management also have given the best wishes for this. শুধু দু একটা জিনিস বলে যেটা শেষ করতে চাইবো যে ইটস আ ভেরি কোইন্সিডেন্টাল, আপনাদের অনেকের মতোই আমিও বাঙালি হিসাবে ভীষণভাবে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের ভক্ত, অ্যান্ড আই জাস্ট হ্যাপেন টু রিড ফর দ্য সেকেন্ড টাইম একেই বলে শুটিং, অনেকে আপনারা পড়ে থাকবেন, এবং খুব অবাক হয়েছিলাম পড়ে যে এই ফেমাস ছবিটা নাকি শেষ করা যাচ্ছিল না টাকার অভাবে, এবং অনেক সময় মানে দ্য থিংস ওয়্যার দ্যাট কে ওই সময় যে ফিল্ম যাতে নষ্ট না হয়, মানে কোনো একটা রিটেক বারবার যাতে করতে না হয়, হি ওয়ান্টেড টু বি দ্যাট পারফেক্ট যাতে একবারে হয়। আই অলসো রেড কে ওই সময় ছবিটা রিলিজ হতে একটু দেরি হচ্ছিল বলে যে বাচ্চারা অ্যাক্টিং করছিলেন তাদের বয়স একটু বেড়ে যাচ্ছিল। সো দেয়ার ওয়ার দোজ চ্যালেঞ্জেস যে কীভাবে সেইগুলো সিনেমার পর্দায় সেগুলোকে দেখা যায়। আই অলসো ওয়েন্ট থ্রু আ ভেরি হিলারিয়াস ইনসিডেন্ট, যে কোনো একটা জায়গায় বোধহয় একটা কুকুর তাড়া করবে কোনো একটা ফিল্মে, কীভাবে একবারে সেই কুকুরটাকে তাড়া করানো, অ্যান্ড অল দ্যাটস কোনো একজন অ্যাক্টর বোধহয় মারা গেছিলেন চলবার সময়, মুভিটা শুটিং করবার সময়, কিভাবে সেই চ্যালেঞ্জটাও অতিক্রান্ত হয়েছিল। সো দিস ইজ অ্যান অ্যামেজিং স্টোরি অফ আ amazing person, and I really feel humble that I am speaking about him today in this great place and in front of such a august gathering. তো আগেন এটা বলে শেষ করব যে উই হ্যাভ বিন এক্সট্রিমলি প্রাউড 60th ইয়ার অফ পথের পাঁচালীর সঙ্গে আমরা যে সামান্যভাবে আমরা আমাদের অবদান রাখতে পেরেছি, এবং আমরা চাই ঠিক এইচডিএফসি অ্যাজ আ প্রতিষ্ঠানও যে পথ অতিক্রম করছে 1977 থেকে সমস্ত ভারতবর্ষের গ্রাহকদের এই দ্য ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট নিড অফ হাউজিং ফর অল, সেটাই যাতে আমরা আমাদের লিটল কন্ট্রিবিউশন রেখে এগিয়ে যেতে পারি। থ্যাংকস আ লট টু অল অফ ইউ ওয়ান্স এগেন। থ্যাংক ইউ। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Mr. Ganguly. May I now please call upon the speakers to come on stage. I will call out their names alphabetically again. Srimati Aparna Sen. Sri Dibakar Banerjee. Sri Dilip Badgaonkar. Srimati Nondita Das. Srimati Shormila Tagore. Sri Shujit Sarkar. Sri Sujoy Ghosh. Sri Shumon Mukhopadhyay. And our moderator, Sri Dhritiman Chatterjee, please. Over to Dhritiman Chatterjee.
Once again, welcome on behalf of all of us, and it's wonderful to see such a full house on a Sunday morning. Let me start by welcoming a very special guest, the original Opu, Shubir Banerjee, who is with us. The theme for today's discussion is Indian cinema. What is national and what is regional? Essentially, we are trying to explore, with the rich and varied experience that we have here, in direction, in acting, in cinema administration, whether certain kinds of cinema are becoming overbearing in terms of their financial and their cultural presence, and whether there is a danger of these cinemas stifling what we call regional cinemas, especially now with the convergence of media, digital media, and so forth. Does it make sense to talk of divisions like national cinema and regional cinemas anymore, or should we evolve new definitions? We'll get into that discussion. Before that, I want to rewind to 60 years ago. It just occurred to me that when Pather Panchali released on the 26th of August in Boshu Street Cinema in Kolkata, 4 of us on the stage were young children. The other 5 had not yet, let us say, made an appearance as yet on the world stage. So let me begin by asking that question to Shormila. You were very young when Pather Panchali released. You worked with Rai soon thereafter in 1959. When did Pather Panchali strike you, or did Pather Panchali strike you, as being something unusual, as being something out of the ordinary as far as cinema was concerned?
Well, as you say, I was what? I was about 9 years old when Pather Panchali was released. And those days, I don't know, some of you in the audience might remember that we were not allowed to see films. So that was my one of my first outings, so to speak. Well, we were all taken.
Yeah, not many in the audience may have been around at that time.
Yes, and we were all, you know, it was, and Manikda, Satyajit Rai, was the first person who was, you know, all of us, the so-called middle class of Bengal, looked up to him because he had already, you know, I mean, that film was phenomenal. So all of us went to see that film. I was given a new frock to wear. And I remember actually quite a lot from that film. I remember the thunderstorm and Durga getting beaten up. I think that found a resonance somewhere. And then I remember her having that khatta arm, you know, and that scene. And many others like that. So yes, it was a very, very important day in my life, and I most certainly remember. But even, I mean, like the 60 years, and soon after I worked in Opu Sangshar, and those years have just gone so quickly, and more so because not a single year has passed where there hasn't been a celebration of Rai somewhere in the world. And even after his passing, I remember when I was invited to San Francisco when he was given the Lifetime Achievement Award. And from then to now, like every year, and as you know, last year Academy celebrated Trilogy because they'd never shown it in Los Angeles. So they had screening of Trilogy, and they very kindly invited me. So I was privy to a houseful audience of today's generation watching Trilogy and reacting exactly the same way as we did, you know, being thrilled when Oppu and Durga's, their first glimpse of the train. So from 10-year-old to now, I obviously appreciate Pather Panchali that much more. It means so much to me, and what I didn't see then. Because this was the first cinema that came out of India, which compelled the Western audience to take note of Indian cinema and put us on the world map. So that contribution is fantastic. And as you know, Criterion and has, this year, Chicago is celebrating a retrospective of Manikda. Hamburg is celebrating a retrospective of Manikda. So he continues, after so many years after his passing, he continues to dominate our conversation, our discourse, our cultural interactions. So I think that is truly amazing.
Opuna, tell us about your, I mean, not necessarily when you first saw it, but when did it strike you that there was something different about this film?
Well, I have to say that I was waiting for the film. Because in school, I was probably just a little younger than Rinku at that time. What happened in school was that they used to all see Suchitra Uttam starrers. And we used to beg to be allowed to be shown those, but we never were. Baba used to say, wait, darao, Manik ekta chobi korche, ota release hobe 1955 e. And so we were all waiting for the day. It's not as, I mean, there's no way I can forget, because now I was going to see a Bengali film. And I remember crying my heart out. I think I cried through most of the film. Laughed, cried. It was quite wonderful. And one of the things that I learned after they left, right at the end, a snake came out. And I said, why is that? So I remember my father telling me, ota Bastu Shap. And that's when I first learned about Bastu Shap. Now, what I would like to say is that there is so much of Bengal, so much of the roots in the film, but they never come in the way of a universal appreciation of it. That is what is fantastic. My husband, who used to teach until some time ago in USA, told me that, 6-foot-tall rugby players or soccer players would come. They were watching the film on a screen that was bad, a print that was bad, and subtitles couldn't be read, but at the end of it, they had red eyes, they were sobbing their hearts out. So there is something universal that appeals. The stories of human beings, like Manikaka said himself, if it's not about human beings, then it's about nothing. So that is the main thing. And it was not bogged down by details that could come in the way of universal appreciation, even though it was wonderfully detailed. That struck me very, very deeply. Even then, it struck me deeply, not all this, but the fact that it was so detailed, that it went into such minutiae, and which seemed very real. I loved it.
Dilip Bhatkankar, can we hear from you? You'll notice that I'm sticking with the seniors to start with. Can we hear from you, particularly probably about this whole issue of cultural universality, which Opuna was talking about right now, when you first saw the film, or when the film first struck you?
Well, I first read about the film before I saw it. And I read about it while still in school, because for the first time in its very long history, the Times of India's editor at that time, Shamlal, who wrote a column under the name Adib, wrote about this picture. And he wrote about it sometime in February of '56, before the film got its award at Cannes. And at that time, the very first 2 paragraphs told me, and I was very, very young then, that the history of Indian cinema would be determined in 2 phases: a pre-Pather Panchali Indian cinema and a post-Pather Panchali Indian cinema. And the first two lines, which I want to read to you, this is what Shyamlal wrote. It is absurd to compare Panchali with any other Indian picture, for even the best of the pictures produced so far have been cluttered with cliches. Panchali is pure cinema. There is no trace of the theatre in it. It does away with plot, with grease paint, with songs, with the slinky charmer and the sultry beauty, with the slapdash hero breaking into song on the slightest provocation or no provocation at all. Panchali makes a complete break with the world of make-believe, of a melange of the impossible. So these are the first opening lines of that article. And obviously, the film I saw many, many years later. My other rendezvous, so to speak, with Panchali came years later, when I was studying at the film school in Paris. Mercifully, I graduated, but mercifully didn't enter the profession. And that is because of two people, one of whom was my teacher of film history, George Sadul, a great historian, and the other was a dear, dear friend of mine who was the curator of the Cinémathèque Française, Lottie Eisner. And Lottie Eisner was an absolute thrall of Satyajit Ray. And years later, she published her autobiography. It's in German. It's not yet, alas, been translated into any other language. But I'm taking the liberty of just telling you why she felt that Panchali was important and why Satyajit Ray was important. She says, and I'm giving you a free translation from the German, she says, I believe in fate, and my fate was that I came to know men of the quality of Bertolt Brecht, Peter Lorre, Satyajit Ray, Shadi Abdel Salam, and Henri Langlois. And the reason she says she was enthralled of these men was because they helped her in the process of discovery of other cultures, discovery of other ways of making films, and so on and so forth. So this was the second thing. But if I have a minute, I'd like to tell you something about the circumstance in which the film won the award. And I haven't written about it earlier, but the fact is that the jury members were shown the film at an ungodly hour when everyone else was out lunching. And there were very, very few people in the outside the jury members. And this is a story that Lottie Eisner told me. She says it was there at a terrible time, and François Truffaut was there for about 7-8 minutes, and he walked out. And we were all very, very surprised because we were enthralled with that film, and so was George Sadul, and so were a couple of other people. And they then fought to get the film screened again, and that is when the revelation happened. So I asked Lottie, I said, what was the objection of Truffaut to the film? And
if I might interject, I think there's this probably apocryphal remark attributed to Truffaut, who apparently said it was a film about bad through the paddy fields.
Well, I don't think it's quite an accurate thing, because the French don't have paddy fields. They don't grow rice. But what I did get to know from Lottie Eisner, confirmed later from my teacher, George Sadul, was he was asked later why he left. And he said, well, nothing moves in the film. It's so slow. And it's at that time that Lottie Eisner reminded Mr. Truffaut of something that she'd heard directly from Satyajit Ray, saying, for the West, action means movement. Whereas for us, action does not necessarily mean movement. And this was therefore the beginning. So later on, of course, we got to discuss the other films of Satyajit Ray. But if I have 2 more minutes, I'd like to conclude with a story which is, I'm saying for the first time in public, I hope to write about it at some point. I asked her, I said, listen, Lottie, what is it that really appealed to you in the Ray films? And she says, don't tell anyone. I love the saris. So at one time, I said, Lottie, a friend of my family is coming from Pune. Would you like me to give you a gift? She says, oh yes. Can you ask your mother to send me a sari? And promptly, there was a sari which was sent. which I gifted to Lottie Eisner. And she says, of course, I'm not going to wear it. Saris can't be worn by Europeans. Some months pass by, I go to her house for lunch, and what do I find? That a piece of the sari was turned into a tablecloth. So I said, well, that does look nice, isn't it, Lottie? She says, it reminds me so much of Satyajit Ray. Then I said, but what happened to the rest of the sari? He says, oh, that is an old story. Mary Pickford had come home. She loved the sari so much that I gave it to her, the rest of the piece. And she says, a few months later, I go to LA. Mary asks me over for lunch. And what do you think I see? I noticed the first thing that Mary Pickford had turned that piece of sari into a window curtain. These Americans have no culture. So I think it's a lovely itinerary for someone who discovered Satyajit Ray at that very first screening at Cannes, and then it went on. I hope that her autobiography is translated, because she has quoted from 2 letters that Satyajit Ray had sent her years later. They'd become great friends by then. And in the letter, you can see that there is a kind of a friendship that develops. She was, of course, a film historian, the greatest historian of Weimar cinema, and fled Germany. She was the first, incidentally, the first film journalist and critic and commentator as a woman. There was no one else. And then she had left when the Nazis took over. But there was this great sense of respect that she had for Satyajit Ray. And the only thing that she cherished, I think, as part of that memory of hers with regarding Ray, was that tablecloth which my mother had sent her.
Yeah, well, tablecloth, saris, and curtains, you said. Let's, we'll come back to this later, but let's fast forward a bit. Let's fast forward about 20 years from then to another, in a different way, another iconic film, Sholay, in 1975. Now, Sholay probably had some of the attributes that Dilip Padgaonkar was talking about in Shyamlal's piece, had some of those, let us say, attributes, defects. But we cannot dispute the fact that Sholay, in a very different kind of way, was an important and iconic film in Indian cinema. So let us come to some of the younger members of the panel. Diwakar, would you like to talk about what Sholay meant to you?
You know, Sholay, I never saw Sholay.
Oops, I take back the question.
And there's a history behind it, because I heard it on the bus. Because we used to have a school bus we used to have school buses in Delhi, and I think 75, I was like in KG 2 or whatever, you know, I don't know, but we used to be put on school buses, and there was this great friend of mine called Rajesh Quatra, strapping, you know, man of 5, and he used to sort of, you know, hold the seat for me. And I remember over a period of 1 week, he narrated to me Sholay. And that was an iconic narration, and I kind of cashed in on it and narrated Sholay to other people in school for the next 5 years without having seen the film. I even changed the ending a bit, where Amitabh Bachchan comes alive, because, you know, I didn't like the fact that he died. So in my version, he comes back. And I remember interesting discussions about people who had seen Sholay, looking at me, narrating Sholay to them, and genuinely in a crisis of belief. You know, I mean, is this the film that I saw or whatever? So that's my relationship with Sholay, and I saw it years later. And for all of you who may have seen a bit of the North, Sholay was also familiar to us by the first released audio cassette of the whole dialogues of the film.
Yes.
So we heard Sholay before we saw Sholay. So that's about Sholay, but I really want to say a little bit about my exposure to Pather Panchali because it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I again, when I was a kid in Delhi, Provashi Bangali, my first exposure to Pather Panchali was through a book called Amatir Bhepu, which was the children's version of Pather Panchali. And I don't know how many of you know, the first edition of that was published by a very interesting publication house called Signet Press. And Satyajit Ray used to illustrate and design for Signet Press. And what we had was the Signet Press copy of Amatir Bhepu, where the cover and the inside illustrations were done by Satyajit Ray. And if you see those illustrations, and this I think was done somewhere in 48 or 49, there are experts here who will know probably better than me when it was published, and you can see that Ray had started sketching out, or Ray had at least started figuring out and seeing the film years before he made it. A lot of it is there. His ink and brush visuals of Durga and Oppu running through the fields, of the locomotive arriving, and a heartbreaking image which ends the film, which is as Oppu, and in the book I think they go away in a train. That's where it finishes, and Oppu looks out of the train window. And you see a little village girl. It's the illustration of a train window and a little village girl standing in the paddy fields. But by that time Durga is dead. And my biggest memory is that my Didi, 8 years older to me, who kind of was like a second mom to me, she used to say, "Da, kamyo more jabo erokom Durgar moto." And I used to, "Na, tui morbi na," and all that. For those who don't understand Bengali, she used to give me emotional blackmail. Okay, I'll also die like Durga, a tragic teenager behavior. And then I used to say, no, you can't die and all that. So my exposure to Pather Panchali has been through Satyajit Ray's illustrations. And when I saw the film years later, I must admit, it was bogged down, at least to us, I was 13 or 14, by the tag of art cinema. For example, I still remember one of my dadas used to say, "Oh, to ondokar chhobi, torch fele dekhte hai." It's like the picture is very dark, you have to put a torch to see. He was half kidding, but a lot of people had not seen Pather Panchali in the 80s and had thought that it was some obscure and slightly elitist, or however you call it, art cinema. But when we saw it on Doordarshan, I still remember my mother running down from the kitchen and looking at the scene of that village school where the master comes and takes a bit of oil and puts it on his head and goes away. And my mother said, "My school teacher used to be exactly like this." So none of us saw it as art film. We saw it as a very entertaining and a very moving film. We sat in front of our black and white television sets and we saw the film. And it was not an intellectual or an artistic experience at all. It was a cathartic experience. And perhaps the tags that we give films sometimes do them disadvantage. I think Pather Panchali is a much more alive and independent-spirited and actually fast-moving film than a lot of us think it is.
But you know,
I think it's because his persona, Manikda's persona as a person, with his height and his booming voice and his erudition, I think that is the image sometimes came in the way of understanding his films. And yes, it was a kind of rift, and we fought this all the time on many platforms because unlike the popular perception, his films ran to a full house. It recovered, except maybe for Devi and Kapurush. Most of his films have done very well at the box office. He was a great communicator. He was a wonderful storyteller. It had wonderful humor in his films, including Pather Panchali, and those scenes remain with us forever. So it's a complete misconception. That
this
he was an
thing
art house
about
figure.
this point about the film being slow, I remember my father telling me that he once went to see one of Manikaka's films, and he said, I went prepared because you come, you're trying to make it from the office, the hustle and bustle of the city, the pace of the city is so different, and then it takes you a moment to settle down. And in the beginning you think, this is taking long. But But then the pace of the film gets you, because it is a different pace, it is a different time, a different place. So that's what happens. And I think Dibakar's point about, people thinking of certain films as art cinema and basically ruining them with that perception also holds true of other films. Because I remember a friend of mine, she was very, very upset one day, and to cheer her up, I said, come, let's see Seven Samurai. She said, I put it on, and she said, oh, black and white and subtitles, Japs on top of it, forget it. She wouldn't be cheered up by that. While I remember my daughter Konkul and I watching it over television and cheering, really cheering. But, this does happen. People just put these tags and that's it.
But quickly, briefly, I won't take too long.
Sure.
I just want to share this with all of you because you might find that amusing. As you know that I've worked in Bengali films and I've worked in Hindi films, and my visibility and viewership is probably, the Hindi films have given me more visibility. And every time I worked in a Hindi film, they would say, can you just speed it up a little bit? This is not a Bengali film. And when I would come and work in Bengali film, they'd say, but this is not a Hindi film. Can you just take a little bit more time and think about this? So I don't know whether this regional adversary or point of view, but I watched this, and which I found very, very amusing.
Yeah, I think we are, I am not even having to prompt. As you can see, we are slowly getting into this whole divide, if you want, between what is national and what is regional, and we are beginning to talk about, the sort of divisions between so-called art cinema and so-called commercial and mainstream cinema. When I sent a kind of introductory email about what we are going to talk about, two or three people, including Nandita, replied very promptly. The reply that fascinated as well as intrigued me was actually from Shujoy, who said, it was very cryptic, but it set me thinking. Shujoy said, let's do it. Let's do what was left unexplained. He said, let's do it. And after Aholla, I'm convinced that cinema has no language. Now that intrigued me. So will you sort of talk about, it intrigued me because it appeared to me that without language, how can you communicate? For example, people like Noam Chomsky would say that language is the basis of thought. Without language, you can't think. So when somebody very confidently says cinema has no language, I'm wondering what he means.
Okay, how long do we have?
We have the whole afternoon if you don't want lunch.
No. But first and foremost, I would like to thank all of you for coming here and hearing us, and of course, Babuda somewhere hiding over there, and I want to thank Babuda for organizing this amazing event where I'm sharing the stage with some of my favorite people. Thank you, and thank you for coming. When Dhritimanda sent me that message saying that let's talk about divide in terms of what is regional, what is national, and I got very encouraged. I got very enthused about the whole thing because recently I experienced something which made me rethink my whole, actually not rethink, probably confirm my view towards cinema. Which I believe is a very uniting factor amongst various group of people. It's a device which can unite, which can actually bring together a lot of people from different beliefs or different parts, and to that extent, I think a lot depends on people like you out there who are the audience, who are actually becoming broader by the day. Just like how we see a Korean film or a Japanese film or a French film where we are reading the subtitles and understanding about the film, there is no reason why anybody cannot see a Bengali film like that. Even within India, let's start within India first and then maybe go across to the world. So why can't we see a Bengali film with subtitles? Why can't we see a Tamil film with subtitles or any film for that matter. So when I did this small film called Ahalya, Aholla actually, সবাই কেন আহল্যা বলে আমি জানি না. So when I made Aholla,
অহল্যাতে আবার একটা হয়ে গেছে, আমায় কয়েকজন জিজ্ঞেস করলেন যে এই সেমিনারে কে কে আছেন, তো আমি বললাম শর্মিলা ঠাকুর, অপর্ণা সেন, সুজয় ঘোষ, অহল্যা ঘোষ, অহল্যা ঘোষ।
হ্যাঁ, এখন আমার নাম জেন্ডার সব বদলে গেছে। তো যাকে, so Aholla actually was seen by a lot of people, and the most surprising fact was nobody came to me and said, I saw a Bengali film. You know, nobody said that. কেউ একবারও অহল্যাকে একটা বাংলা সিনেমা হিসেবে দেখেনি. Sorry, do I have to translate this also as I speak?
No.
No. হ্যাঁ, এবং which was very encouraging because I am sitting amongst my colleagues in Bombay who are predominantly Hindi speaking, who are predominantly used to the Hindi film culture, and they are actually saying we saw a film. They were not bothered by the language, they were not bothered by the actor, but they were only interested in the content. You know, so I believe if we have the right content, I believe if we have the right way of presenting that content in terms of a technical finesse, there is no reason why we can't so-called, crossover. I mean, when we talk about a crossover film, what Rai Babu actually successfully did, so-called crossover cinema, I don't feel crossover cinema is about getting revenue or money from outside India. It's about getting an audience base outside India. You know, your film is truly crossover when you have an audience who's not the intended audience. You know, they're that when we move beyond that, and I think that's what's kind of what Aholla showed me, and Aholla also showed me the fact that there are other windows. I mean, regional cinema, what the biggest problem we find in regional cinema is a budget. You know, we don't have enough money, and rightfully so, because there's no way to recover the money. Now that people, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little technical here, you know, like when things like internet are opening up, we have ways to make money. We have ways to bring back the money that we spend here. And I think that's very encouraging. And that's why I got very encouraged when you, Shundoda, said, let's talk about this.
Let me ask Shujit, you know, taking up from what Shuja was saying, you know, the whole economics of cinema. Why was, this might sound like a stupid question, but why was Piku made in Hindi?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I thought it's a Bengali film, so yeah, the language was possibly Hindi because that's what I knew. Piku is a different story altogether in my life, so you know how it happened and when it happened. But you know, coming back to Pather Panchali, I just want to talk about it, just to give my tribute to the master. My Baba took me, it was I think in 1975 or 76, he took me to watch this film in Radha Cinema somewhere in Barakpur. And I'm basically a sports person, so I have nothing to do with cinema or literature or anything. And he took me, and he forcibly took me, and I slept while watching the film. So that was my first interaction with Pather Panchali. Second interaction was, I shifted to Delhi, and I was in class 10th. And as an academic session, my school was asked to watch this film, Pather Panchali. And we all went, and we sat inside the theater. And film started, obviously, the lights went off. And I think when the film ended, there were only 10 people. I was also not there in that. So only 10 people watching the film, 10 students. They were all out, so they didn't get it. So it was really it started off as really as a boring film for me when I started my watching the film, you know. And then jump, I somehow get into theater, I started theater, and then in Delhi, in Shri Fort, there's a show of Pather Panchali. And vaguely I've seen some films in Doordarshan at that time, and then I jump and go over to Shri Fort, And it is the last show around 9 o'clock in Delhi winters, in January the film festival happens there. And there were some 10, 15 people at that time. From the last show they came in, and when I thought there would be 10 or 15 people in the theater. I went in and it was just jam-packed like this. And then I saw that film, and possibly that film and that time and that day, I was numb, and that was a new chapter from there on. Like what he said, there was a Pather Panchali, before Pather Panchali and then after Pather Panchali. And that's where I am now, post Pather Panchali, after seeing the film. And that's how it has affected me. And in any way, whatever I do in my cinema nowadays, it's actually I copy him. I try to get inspirations from him, copy whatever I can. You will not notice what I copy, but I know what I copy.
Yeah, well, you know what you're copying. He won't know what you're copying. The question is, of course, whether the audience knows what you're copying. And,
maybe, obviously, you know what you're copying. So anyway, so it's a, so that's how, so wherever I can put his name or put him, see his film, it's become a Bible in my life. So it's everything. So I have said, regardless that whatever film I do, it's his films that I live with. You asked me about Piku in terms of the language of the. As this debate was, not debate, this talk was about national cinema and regional cinema. I think the Piku is a big example that it's crossed over. I think the biggest business that's the Piku has done is the northern part of India, where I thought they will not get it when I was making the film. So even my producers or everybody, they thought I'm making a Bengali film. So I was nurturing a Bengali film, and nobody will get this. So I think that's a big example, Piku, that it crossed over so well all over. And I'm in both the platforms. I'm also producing regional film. I'm producing Bengali films, and I'm also in a Hindi film. So what Shujai said was absolutely that there is no. I never felt that barrier between a regional cinema or a national cinema. Yes, of course, Hindi language has taken over as being the Bollywood cinema or Indian cinema all across. But if you see the scoring in the national awards, I think more than the 60% of the awards till the last whatever how many years the awards been has all gone to regional cinema, more than. So it's not gone to the national cinema or the Hindi cinema. Recently it's possibly gone to the Hindi cinema in terms of the national awards. And obviously in the international level, it was Satyajit Ray and Ritik Ghatak and Mrinal Sen. Nobody knew apart from the Indian cinema in terms of the international diaspora. So I think that regional cinema and the divide of the national cinema is reduced, and it's reducing day by day.
Let me play the devil's advocate here a bit and take the analogy of language. Now, as we all know, India does not have a national language under the Constitution. We have 22 or 23 official languages, of which Hindi is one. But consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, Hindi has become a kind of a national language, and there is also a tendency to kind of officially sometimes position Hindi as the national language, which everybody must learn, which must become the medium of communication. Is there an analogy with cinema? I mean, is that what is happening to Hindi cinema, that it is the national cinema and then there are regional cinemas?
But you see, there are two things. The government obviously is pushing Hindi. And every government offices, there is a lot of money is being spent, a lot of, there are proper instructions that you have to promote Hindi, you have to speak in Hindi, etc. So there is that full-fledged push from the government to do so. Also, Bollywood has popularized Hindi all over. Because I remember in Chennai when there was a lot of protest against Hindi, and Aradhana released, and it ran, it became a golden jubilee there. So despite the language and despite the protests, etc. So Hindi, over the years, and Aradhana was, what, 40 years ago or something? So over the years, Hindi has become almost otherwise, of course, the English is the link language. I mean, whatever you call it, Hinglish, Pinglish, Binglish, whatever. So that kind of pidgin English has become a link language. And after that, it's Hindi. And then so it is kind of, and when talking about, going back to your point about the divide, so I think this kind of linguistic divides is melting away. To a film lover, this is no longer a factor. Because many places, like, Bengali is spoken here and in Bangladesh. Now, Tamil and Telugu is spoken in the South Indian, in Andhra and in Tamil Nadu. But it's also spoken in Malaysia, it's also spoken in Sri Lanka, or wherever the Indian diaspora is, Indian languages are. So, this kind of categories are just dissipating. It is dissolving completely. In Marrakesh, it's like a pirated culture. In Malaysia, there's kung fu and martial art. But then they have very excellent films in China, for instance, which is completely dependent on international audience. In Turkey, the kind of films they're making, there is a local consumption and there's an international consumption. In Iran, their entire film is dependent on international community. So it is transcending, and you cannot think of a nation in singular term anymore. It's a hybrid, plural entity which is constantly talking to other cultures. And thanks to the internet, as all of you were saying, that another kind of, and also like Ritu used to say a lot, that so much of his inspiration has come globally. The kind of film that he was making, about gender, about bisexuals, etc., what he was. So he said, I mean, where is the inspiration in this country? I'm looking elsewhere, and So there is many ways the directors are trying to express themselves, and then they do not want to be constricted only with geographical
But there is
boundaries.
something here, for instance, in Bangladesh, if only our films could officially be shown in Bangladesh, a whole lot of the financial problem for the producers in Bengal would be solved.
Yeah.
But that has not happened. In China, they took special steps. They got hold of some directors who they thought were good, and they really, really pushed them from the government. I mean, there was a lot of government patronage. Coming to what Shrujit said just now, I mean, when Dhritiman asked why Piku was made in Hindi, well, let me just share one little, I won't take much time. There was a talk of making Mr. and Mrs. Iyer Part 2. And everyone got very excited about it, including when I went to Paris, they said when, etc. But I was then asked to make it in Hindi. So I said, but how? Because one of them is Bengali and one of them is Tamilian. So why would they speak in Hindi? No, but unless it's in Hindi, it's very difficult to get an audience. I have faced this myself. So I really know why Shrujit probably had to make it in Hindi and yet make it a Bengali film.
Shrujit, you're not telling us.
I think because I think what we started off the talk as, yes, we have a national language which is Hindi, and when
let me remind you again that actually it's not. But
it's not. I mean, I'm saying Hindi is a language being used, but I think when it started off, there was a lot of protest in South India also. Why there is a Hindi language being, and there was a complete anti there. But see this. There is not a cinematic difference, but in terms of the release, in terms of the film's reach, this debate will always prevail in India because we speak some 24 or 23 or some whatever languages. And in other countries, they have only one language that they make a film on. So in our country, we have many languages. For example, for example, in Maharashtra now, between 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening, in one of the multiplexes, one show should be a Marathi film. So now, because of that, so many Marathi film, I think sir will know, that has done a marvelous business in Mumbai itself because of this regulation. So what happens, this platform of the regional cinema with the other national films, from big films to small films, whatever the content-driven films, what we call the infotainments nowadays terms. So all have the place in terms of catering to the audience.
Yeah, can I go too? I said I emailed members of this panel, and Nandita was very enthusiastic. And she said, I really want to speak about this because I've worked in 9 languages. 10. She's beaten me. I've only worked in 4. So I'd like Nandita's take on this whole thing.
Yeah, I feel very passionately about it because a lot of the times I hear, why do you do these regional films that nobody sees? You know, where are you? Have you done any film in the last few years? Every time they have to introduce me, they start off with Fire Earth, which was like 18, 16 years ago. And, but when I go to Tamil Nadu, they quote my Tamil films. If I come to Bengal, then Bengali, or if I go to Kerala, then Malayalam, or Marathi, or Kannada, or Telugu. And it is true. I mean, let's face it, the fact is that films in different languages, I don't even like the word regional, to be honest, because it almost sounds like that's not India, and that Hindi films is supposed to represent India and the rest of it is regions. But lack of a better word, regional cinema, it is true that they operate in smaller pools. And therefore there is, in terms of everything is now dictated by economics. And sadly, economics has interfered with art so much. And we do not have the culture of, you know, reading subtitles like we are talking about, like Shuja, you said, you know, we watch Korean or Taiwanese or Turkish or Japanese films in subtitle. Firstly, we don't, literacy rate is not so, you know, widely in our country, so it automatically eliminates a whole lot of people who actually thrive on cinema. I mean, that's their only form of entertainment. So it's also difficult. Within the section that actually could probably read subtitles, all of us would, I'm sure, like to see films from different parts of the country, never get to see them because the nexus between the producers and distributors is so deep that they have assumed that those films will not do well. And sadly, some of the better work, I mean, personally speaking, some of my better work is in films that many people haven't seen. And but that's the choice I've made. I could either do films, let's say in Hindi, and probably compromise on the kind of work I want to do, or do films that less people see, but the solace is in the fact that, one, it is archived. These films will hopefully live forever. Many of them, although I don't even have a DVD of, because you know, it was made in the 35mm era, and half the time they didn't even have money to sort of digitize the film, but at least those stories are captured somewhere. And many of these films are inspired by literary works. So it's really nice that you take you know, a strong literature of that state and then they're adapted into films. So this unfortunate divide exists, but actually if one sees, all of it is national cinema. And I think at some level we all need to champion the fact, because we are, as audiences, we are the losers. I went to Chennai recently, and they told me some young filmmakers who people hadn't even heard of are making amazing films, are really sort of fearless films, because there is a lot of safe playing. When you cater to a mainstream, of course you're trying to please a large number of people. In anything, if you're trying to please a large number of people, then you have to dumb it down a bit. You have to make it appealing for a lot more people. You know, there is that dilemma whether you're really making it the kind of film that you would like to see, or you're second guessing what people would like to see. So I think that dilemma exists, but there was something called Kakka Motte in Tamil that you might know because you stay close to Chennai.
This particular film I'm not aware of. But I want to come back to this subject, but go ahead.
No, so I just meant that it was supposed to be they said this is not a Slumdog Millionaire. It's a fabulous film about two street boys wanting to have pizza, you know, and the problems they go through because of the way they look, the clothes they wear, and what are those little antiques that they go through just to be wanting to go to a McDonald's to have pizza. So small stories, and you know, here somebody was talking about some of the Bengali films that we never get to see. So I think till as audiences we don't create that demand for being more open, for wanting to see other stories, regional cinema will sadly continue to be there. And that's what Hollywood has done to Europe. A lot of good European cinema has died because Hollywood has just taken over. So that's as an actor, that's the choice I've made, that yes, you know, I will, because even sort of the more mainstream, even the better directors, and with due apology, I mean, all the wonderful directors who are on this panel who I would love to work with, but very understandably, either they would want to, if they want their film and their kind of film, which is unique also, and which they want to tell compelling stories. If they wanted to make it work, they either have to take completely new actors where there's no baggage, or take popular actors that at least makes their not thoda hatke film into a more popular space. So someone like me
now we are really getting into this.
Do you think...
Can I just come back to you? Yeah. Because before that, I'd like to ask Shuman, who traverses the world of both theatre and cinema, whether this, this divide, national, regional, whether this exists in theatre festivals, for example, in the National School of Drama Festival, and how is it, this divergence, how is it negotiated?
Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Actually, my experience of working recently in National School of Drama Repertory Company with a play called Khilona Nagar. It's based on a novel by Nabarun Bhattacharya. And yes, I was always wondering about the fact that in theatre we don't have subtitles. We have been watching theatre festivals all around. Now the recent trend of subtitling the theatre has happened, but actually our tradition of watching different kind of theatre, from Ghashiram Kotwal to Charandas Chor to Wara Chidabandi, or even going to other festivals in other parts of the country, we have never felt the use of subtitling. It's the language of theatre which matters, but somehow National Theatre School of Theatre, they always do Hindi theatre as a repertory company, plays, which is quite strange. Again, that the context of language, Hindi as a language, comes to the foreground. Why we are in India, where we speak so many languages, we are talking Hindi as the main language. But there is a part of, I think, a bigger design. I think that the main context is the economics. The major part is the social and economical perception, and how the world has changed, how the finance has changed, the financial models has changed, and which actually affected our daily perception of life. At the same time, culture. We cannot take culture out of the perception of finance, of the economic models, because they are part of the, what I would say, the cultural models are part of the financial models. You cannot negate. Now, suppose, taking an example of Calcutta Book Fair. If you see the Calcutta Book Fair, the major section of Little Magazine, which was a big part, like the young voices, the voices who have not got the fundings of the big publishers, and who are independent voices, who even don't want to get into big publishing houses because they want to create a different voice. The same thing about small cinema, small literature, small little magazines. If you see the continuously, it is physically seen that how in the book fair, the little magazine part has been slowly cornered to one part, and now it's almost invisible. So it's like same Shankhosh poetry, the Moog Theke Jai Biggapone. So finally you are covered by the big things, big posters, big hoardings, and small independent voices are slowly getting kind of moved. It's the same logic is creating up the regional cinema, that if you see the recent example of Court as a film, it's a magnificent film in contemporary, history of Indian cinema, I would say. Amazing film, but Court ran in Kolkata only for a couple of weeks, for one show in one place in Salt Lake. And Masan, another very good film, is still running in different theatres all over India. It is a Hindi film. It is backed up by good producers, French and Indian, but Court didn't have that. In spite of being the best Indian film this year, we couldn't take the cinema further than 2 weeks in Kolkata, where we always boast about supporting the great art. So there lies the economics and how the finance, how the distribution model runs in our country. Why Shujit has to make a Hindi film, why Dibakar has to make a Yasraj film, and why Shujit has to make a different kind of film, but they are looking for a producer who can bring that film to a national level, can sustain a film. Whatever voice you have, whatever great cinematic talent you have, whatever great authentic cinematic style you have, if you don't being supported and pushed by the big houses who know how to market, quote unquote, a film, you are not seen. That's the common financial and social situation. It's about literature, it's about painting, it's about cinema. And cinema, as because it brings so much money, it is such a big money invested in the medium cinema. I think the focus in cinema is much more bigger. So this is an example. We are pushing borders. Sujit is pushing borders, Dibakar is pushing borders, Shuja is putting on, everybody is pushing their own borders, but it's an uneven circle which is happening. One side getting more and more pushed, the other side is getting dragged in. Films like regional great films made here and there and not been getting the great distribution, cycle. How can they push film? Like, I think that's why, so we are boasting within our own circle of own achievement, which actually is not. Like Iranian cinema, as Shumlirdi correctly said, that it is going on international audience. Turkish cinema also, like Chilan or Abbas Kiarostami, the filmmakers, they are getting audience in Europe. So I think it's the same like the great, like the French cinema goers are continuously morbidly feared about the Hollywood taking over the experimental art cinema. So we are unable to create a different perception of distribution and creation of films. It is not about the film only, it's about the process, how we make the film, how we create the film, how we distribute the film. It's the entire perception. And cinema has to make money. Industry has to make money, so otherwise the industry will not move.
Shubhan, can we come back to you? I think Dilip Patgaonkar wanted to comment.
No, but one second, I just want to say, but like films like, Ritu's films, Aparna's films, get an all India release, don't they, Reena?
Not really, it's PVR that releases it for a week in, say, 4 cities. And no publicity is done. So people don't even get to know that these films are being shown. That's the main problem.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
I've always been extremely skeptical of binary oppositions. National, regional, that's one binary I've been skeptical about. I've been skeptical about the binary of core and periphery. I've been skeptical about metropolitan and mufassil. And because each binary is in fact a construct. It's a construct of the state, it's a construct of an ideology, and we need therefore to examine each of these constructs carefully to find out how much of it is still relevant and how much is not. And that's point number one. Point number two, everything has become fuzzy. The borderlines have become fuzzy, primarily due to this extraordinary revolution in communications technology and an equally far-reaching change in the way markets now operate. So both these give you an idea that you can't remain fixated on this question of the binaries. And it began a long time ago and it's happening all around the world. For example, in Indian cinema, you found that the urban life was equated with moral corruption, whereas village life was unchanging, pristine, and so on and so forth. All of this is a thing of the past. The second point I'd want to make is we speak about regional cinema and national cinema, but do we still speak in the same vein about literature? What is national literature? Is it Hindi? It's not. What is national art? Is there an Indian national art? Or is there a national art and a regional art? You don't find that distinction. And increasingly you find that the distinctions even in matters of everyday food. You see, what is it that is a national dish and what is a particularly regional dish? I mean, one example is my breakfast this morning where I had a Punjabi dish and a South Indian dish, but no Bengali dish. So I think this fuzziness has crept in. We should be in touch with the fuzziness, but things are changing, and it compels us to take a very hard look, not just within our borders, national, regional,